Hello friends and welcome. I am Samantha of Krebs Bookkeeper Crafts, and if you're new here, I show you how to make things. Subscribe for more. Today I am showing you how to assemble the 10th and final clue in the Fall 2021 Puzzle Mystery Quilt from Cotton Cuts. I am making the small Shaun colorway, which is made up of all of these beautiful Northcott shimmer fabrics. If you are making a different colorway, that is okay. We're mostly working with our finished pieces today, but there will be a few pieces in your clue that came in the mail. Go ahead and match your fabrics using your key and you'll be okay. This is the bundle for month 10 of the Shaun colorway, so let's go ahead and open this up. It is coming with a deck of cards, which I will check out later. And then we also have several long strips that we are going to use for finishing our quilt. So we have a few strips of this ring fabric as well as some squares of this ring fabric. This is fabric C. We're going to set those aside. We have some long skinny strips of fabric E and some wider strips also of fabric E. And then we have, this is our fabric for our binding. For me, it is this beautiful like tiger stripe fabric. There's just enough fabric here for cutting 2.5-inch strips for your binding. I will show you guys how to do the binding probably in a later video where I'll also show you guys how I quilted this quilt. So stay tuned for that. But for this video, I'm just going to show you how to put together the quilt top. So we have a lot of sewing ahead of us. We need all of this fabric, and we also need all of the units that we have made over the last 10 months. It is quite the mountain. And you're probably going to want to print off the instructions like I did this time. Usually I don't, but this one I did because there are a lot of moving pieces. And then we're also probably going to move to the design wall at some point during this, so I apologize that you're not going to see my aesthetic cutting table anymore. So let's get started. We got a lot of sewing ahead of us. So right off, first step, we are going to need our 1A and 1B pieces, and we are also going to need our pieces from clue number 3 and clue number 8. We are going to sew these together with our 3 will be in this orientation. Whoops, no, I lied. Just kidding. Our 3 will be in this orientation, and we will sew our 1B fabric to the top. So we are making 3 sides of our star here, and our 8 will be in this orientation, and we're going to sew our 1A's to the top here. So if you remember when we sewed these units together and we sewed this long edge here, we matched this point to this seam, and we matched this seam to this seam. We're going to follow the same concept, and we are going to match this seam to this seam. So when we pressed, if we followed our pressing instructions, this seam is going in that direction, and this seam is going in this direction. So we're going to be able to nest those seams together, and then we're just going to try to match that point up to this seam as close as we can. And we're going to do the same thing over here. So let's go ahead and get these sewn together. Alrighty, so our pieces are sewn together and we need to go ahead and press them. Our instructions are telling us that we need to press them towards the center of the star. So we're going to go ahead and probably lay it when I do it. I will lay it with the small piece down, and then I'm just going to fold it back and press this seam this way. We're going to do that for all 4 of these pieces, and then we'll come right back. Alrighty, our units are pressed nice and flat, so up next we are going to grab our 1C pieces. These are the pieces that have that big strip of D fabric running down the middle of them, and we are going to actually sew these 2 pieces in between our stars to finish completing each of the stars. And we are getting to the point where we are going to have to move to the design wall. Let me see if I can zoom out a little bit to show you guys the whole piece. That is as high as I can go with my tripod right now to show you guys my pseudo messy cutting table. And just so that you guys see, this is what my setup looks like. I've got all of my pieces out in order. So those are my 2, 3, 4. These are the pieces that came, and so on and so forth all the way over. So it might help to lay things out. So there we go. We have our 2 stars on either side of this D strip here. We're going to go ahead and sew these together, matching this point to this seam and nesting these 2 corners. So since we pressed this seam down, and when we made this C piece, we pressed this seam towards this corner, we are going to be able to nest these seams here, nest these seams here, and we're just going to match this point up to this seam as close as we can get. So let's go ahead and sew this together. So I have my first two pieces sewn together, my first 1C piece sewn to my unit. And to make my life easier, I'm just going to go ahead and press this. Now our instructions are telling us to press towards this center piece, so towards this center D strip. We're going to go ahead and press our seams that way. All right, we have our pieces sewn together, and I've also pressed this seam this direction. I guess one thing that I forgot to emphasize when I was laying this out, when you put this 1C piece in here in the middle between our 3 and 8 pieces, you want to make sure that this square, the square that is the same fabric as the upper corner of this one, is opposite. So you want it down here. We want our corners in each corner of the star to be opposite. So this is, for me, this is my C fabric. So you want to make sure your C fabric squares in the bottom here and your A fabric squares in the top up here. Alrighty, so time to move on to the next step. And for that, we are going to need our 4A piece. Now, I don't know about y'all, but this has kind of been in a box for the last 6-ish months. Probably a little bit longer because this is actually June, a whole month later that I'm finally filming this because life. So I've got some pretty heavy creases in this. So you guys might find yourself in the situation as well, where some of these have been sitting here for a while. Some of your pieces have gotten creased or warbly or wrinkly. Just take it over to your ironing board, lay it flat, and then just gently press it with your iron just to get those wrinkles out. So I'm gonna go do that and I'll be right back. So my 4A piece is now nice and flat. Our next instruction is to take this 4A piece and sew it between these two guys. So, and this is where I'm gonna have to move to my design wall after this. So we have one piece up here, we've got our 4A piece here, and then we've taken our units that we've built so far, we've rotated it, and we're putting it here so that our C fabrics are all in the middle here. When we press it, we are going to make sure that we press towards this center piece. It's just easiest to press that way because there's all of these seams here, and they will want to push the fabric that a direction because this is just one continuous piece of fabric. So we're going to sew both of these seams, and then we are going to press this seam towards this center strip here. Oh, one more thing before I go. We also want to make sure that we nest these seams here. So our seams on this guy are pressed towards our long strips, and our seams on this guy are pressed towards this center D fabric. So we want to go ahead and make sure that we nest these seams right here. They should nest perfectly, and we're going to want to match these edges over here. That's how we're going to line everything up. So now I'm going to actually go sew and press. Be back in a second. Wha-bam! It is design wall time. I know I'm going to get questions about what my design wall is. I've got a video coming that will explain that, as well as my whole new studio, because in the process of working on this, I've actually moved houses into an entire new studio sewing space. So I will talk about that in another video that's upcoming. This is what the end of step 3 looks like. Step 4 is putting these little borders of the skinny fabric E strips all around the edge. Like, whoop, that was only half of them. The other half didn't stick because I actually have something I need to talk about that I forgot to talk about in the beginning. So the border strips that have been provided in this month's clue are actually a little bit longer, a bit longer actually, than what they need to be. So what you're gonna need to do is you're gonna need to go ahead and measure your edges, and you're gonna need to trim your border strips to be the right length for your edges. Just some extra wiggle room that Cotton Cuts has graciously provided for us, just in case your 1/4" seam is not quite perfect. And that is okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure these, trim them down, and then, haha, terrible throw and terrible transition, but they stuck. Haha, magic. So these are the pieces that I have left over after I trimmed my borders. I've just got 2 little ones from the left and right side, and then I've got 2 slightly longer ones from the top and bottom. Now, you can go ahead and throw these out if you'd like. You can do whatever you want with them. But if you're like me and you like sewing with scraps, these are perfect for, shameless plug, stained glass blocks. There will be a link right here to the stained glass block tutorial, which is perfect for using up little scraps like this. So the next step, we are going to work with our 2A and 2B pieces. So we've got both of them right here. Remember, these are made up of fabric B, which for me is the blue, and fabric H, which for me is this orange. We're going to take 2A and we're going to go to the design wall. So we have our 2A fabric strips terrible focus, sorry, over here on the left, and we have our 2 B fabric strips over here on the right. I've gone ahead and oriented it so that the B fabric, which for me is this blue up here, is on the top, and the H fabric, which for me is this red, is down here on the bottom. We're gonna go ahead and sew these 2 pieces together along this seam right down here. Ta-da! And then we've gone ahead and pressed that seam to the left. Up next, we are going to need our 5A section and our 5B sections. We want to make sure that we orient them with fabric H on the top. So you'll see my orange fabric H is up on the top here for our 5A sections, and our fabric H on the bottom for our 5B sections. So we're going to sew these together. We are going to sew the 5A on top of the 5B. So we're going to make sure that this fabric down here on the bottom, which is fabric D, is going to be butted up against these top fabric B triangles. So our 5A and 5B pieces are sewn together, and we've gone ahead and pressed this seam here down towards the zigzags. Up next, we are going to add our clue 7 pieces over here on the left and our clue 9 pieces over here on the right. When we sew these pieces together, we are going to go ahead and match these seams here on both sides. When we sewed this one, our directions told us to press this seam down towards this row here, and told us when we sewed this block together, our directions told us to press these seams up towards this 9 patch. So this seam right here will nest perfectly. These ones are also pressed in opposite directions, so these will also nest perfectly as well. We're gonna go ahead and sew all of those together. And then our directions are telling us that we are gonna go ahead and press these seams towards our center 5 pieces. So this seam is gonna go that way. Those seams are gonna go that way. Our units are joined together and the seams are both pressed towards the center. So it is now time to put this unit as well as the previous unit that we made out of the 2A and 2B pieces all around that center square. So here I have everything laid out. On the left and right sides, we have our 2A and 2B pieces that we pieced together a couple steps ago. On the top and on the bottom, we have the pieces that we just put together. We're gonna go ahead and make sure that when we put these together and we lay these out, that the H fabric is gonna be against our center square. So for me, that is this orangey red fabric here is gonna be against the center square, and these side pieces, same thing, that H fabric needs to be against that center square. So we're gonna go ahead and sew these 2 side pieces on first. We're gonna press these towards the outside. So we're gonna press this seam going that way and this seam going that way. And also when we sew our top and bottom on, we're gonna do the same thing as well. We're gonna press it away from the center square here. So let's go ahead and get that all sewn together and pressed. We're gonna grab our fabric C borders and we are going to put them all the way around. We're gonna save these shorter borders for the top and bottom, and these longer borders are gonna go on left and right. So we're gonna go ahead and sew those on just like we sewed on this skinny border here. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure the size of my quilt, and I'm going to trim my borders to fit, sew them on, and then I'm gonna measure the top and bottom, trim my borders to fit again, and then I'm gonna sew them on. So here we go. So the borders are on, and now I am really running out of space without like showing every little corner of my design wall. So we're just gonna get the top part of the quilt for right now. These are the pieces that I have left over from trimming up my borders. And we have 2 more sets of borders effectively left. So we are going to grab our clue number 6 pieces, and we are going to use these to create a border here along the side. We're going to want to make sure that we add them so that the fabric A triangles, which for me are these light blue ones, are on the outside, and then the fabric F and fabric G triangles, which for me are these red ones, are on the inside against this inside border here. We're going to use 2 of each of these units to build this out border here on the left and on the right. So we're going to sew our units end to end so that we create another FG triangle right here with our fabric A on the outside. 2 of our clue number 6 units are going to get sewn end to end, and then they are going to make those left and right borders. So I have gone ahead and sewn those borders on the right and left side. So you can see all the way down the quilt. It's getting a little difficult to fit the full quilt in frame. So next we are going to grab our clue number 4 pieces and the C squares that came with our bundle this month. So the remaining 4B clue pieces look very similar to these pieces that we have here on the side, except there are 3 of these units in each piece instead of 4. Like we did with the pieces on the side over here, we are going to place them along this top border as well as the bottom border, which you can't really see in frame right now. And we are going to butt them up end to end like we did over here. So we are going to sew 2 of these 4B pieces together end to end. So that's our fabric GF bond there. And then we are going to sew 1 of each of these fabric C squares on each end of this strip. Then we'll go ahead and sew this strip, once it's completed, to the top and the bottom of the quilt. So we're going to make 2 strips that look like this, and then we're going to sew 1 to the top and 1 to the bottom of the quilt. So those last pieced borders are now on the top and bottom of the quilt. And it is time for the final border. We have 2 sets of borders left in our bundle from this month. These are our fabric E borders. There's 2 of them here, a longer one and a shorter one. So the shorter one we are going to save for the top and bottom. First we are going to apply the longer one to the left and right, trim it, and then we're going to apply the shorter one to the top and bottom and then trim that as well. So, borders so powerful we changed filming locations. Our Fall 2021 Puzzle Mystery Quilt Olympia is now complete, and with it, this tutorial series. Thank you to Cotton Cuts for providing the fabric for these videos. If you want to see how I finish this quilt, stay tuned for the next video. Until then, catch you later.